Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Tri-State Tramps for Friday, July 24th. We are doing it Lewis County style today, as we are pleased to finally catch up with Ben Gaus, 2000 graduate of Highland High School, who has gone on to great prominence as the Associate Athletic Director at the University of Cal Berkeley, largely in charge of compliance, which is a really neat career arc for Ben, who's kind of found his way right there smack dab in the middle of Pac-12 sports. And I know it's got to be fun. First of all, Ben, just a little bit for the folks at home of kind of how you got from using to this point now where you're in Berkeley, and kind of what the architecture of this journey is for you to this point.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I went to Mizzou to undergrad. Shout out MIZ. I know you'll appreciate that.
COU.
Thank you. I worked with the football team all 4 years as basically an undergrad student recruiting assistant. And then towards my senior year, I decided I wanted to go to law school, and it was during the financial crisis. So I decided to get out of Missouri and try something different. Applied to law school across the country, wound up in California, of all places, which I know you'll appreciate, Chris. And ended up not making my way back to Missouri. So I got an internship with UCLA in compliance after my second year of law school, and I was there for a year during my third year. And then, I got a full-time job at UC Davis, and I was there for about a year and a half, and then I've been at Cal for 5 years. Yeah, so.
You really are my old stomping grounds there, especially with Davis. But, honestly, and for people who don't know, compliance is one of the most important and trickiest jobs in the athletic department. And I know you've always had a meticulous mind, but this is a challenge. I mean, it's sort of an almost daily challenge as you kind of wrestle with the NCAA and try to keep, your Cal athletes, eligible and, within the field and realm of play here. For people who don't understand, basically what is a day like in compliance, and what's your main job function for people on the outside looking in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess maybe the best way to put it is the NCAA has all these rules, right? And so it's my job, or our office's job in compliance, to make sure everyone is following those rules. Student athletes, coaches, all athletic department staff members. So we have 900 student athletes at Cal. Part of that is keeping them eligible, and not necessarily academically. There's other things that come into play, but we file about 50 waivers a year with NCAA, which is a large number, respectively speaking, across the country. There's a million rules, and so it's my job to help navigate everyone to make sure we're doing things to keep ourselves in line with that, and that we're not on probation or making the news for making too big of mistakes. There's a lot that goes into it, but it's mainly I help everybody make sure we're in line with what we're required to do per the NCAA.
Complexity of the NCAA rule book is legendary, and you, as somebody who has to deal with this on an almost daily basis, and you touched on, I mean, there rarely in college athletics are like clear-cut, gigantic violations that fall out of the sky. It's all nuance and subtlety with a lot of this stuff. How much to you does it challenge you? How much fun is it for you to kind of, because I know, again, you would have sought the law degree if you weren't looking for something to kind of, to make the mind work a little. What's that like?
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging, and it is very, very nuanced. And so part of that is the part that I enjoy. I don't practice law, so I went to law school, but I don't go to court or anything like that. But I use the legal skill set to research a lot, because a lot of things that we work in a daily basis in compliance, and really what our coaches go through, especially in the area of recruiting with football and basketball specifically, there's a lot of gray area. So it's not black and white. It's not easy to sift through. So we use a legal skill set to kind of research everything, go through it, find out the answer of what we can do. If we can't do this, maybe we'll try option B. If you can't try option B, maybe we'll try option C. And it's just it's a really interesting, I think, process or procedure when you kind of take a step back and look at it. It doesn't make sense to a lot of people it doesn't even make sense to me sometimes, and I'm in it. That's part of the fun. I think coaches and, at the athletic departments in the university, the presidents, the chancellors, they appreciate it, and they know how important it is, to try to navigate those things to keep everybody on par. So.
You are a very important tool and a very important asset for the institution, obviously. And we've all heard the NCAA horror stories and about the NCAA rule book. From your standpoint, though, what is it really like kind of dealing with the NCAA and just a basic hey question or gray area? Because I assume that's a lot more your job than out and out violations, especially at an academics institution as prestigious as Cal.
Yeah, for sure. And so in compliance, we work for the universities. So we're a team with, our coaches, our athletic directors, we're part of the athletic department. The NCAA gets a bad rep sometimes, obviously, in the public and in the media. And my experience in working with them for whatever, 7 or 8 years is the people that work at the NCAA are great people. They love to help. They're not out to get people. They have directives and policies and procedures they have to abide by, but I've always had a great experience. I know a lot of people that work at the NCAA, and many of them are former student athletes, Division I student athletes. So they totally understand, the world that we live in and get it. And they're very empathetic to the challenges and the issues that we face on a daily basis. So yeah, we with us in the Pac-12, we have a Pac-12 compliance office. So we have a couple people in the Pac-12 conference that do compliance, and so our first outreach is always to them, and I work with them on a daily basis. And they're great. They're awesome. They help us, every way they can to get the answers that we need, and also to try to get the flexibility that we need sometimes to wiggle around whatever the rule might be. So permissibly, of course, but in those gray areas, you got to find a way to do it right. So yeah, Pac-12 is great. The NCAA, I've never really had a bad experience with them, and that's tough too, because like I said, I know they get on the outside sometimes they do get a bad rep on certain things. So, but my experience has always been good. And there's different branches too. The NCAA is this huge organization that has all these different kind of subgroups and entities. So that's what makes it complex sometimes.
An athlete interaction do you get? I have to imagine that's kind of part of the fun for you, because the Cal student base is a little different as well, because it is a pretty obviously be intelligent. You almost have to survive rigor of that that curriculum there. Just for you, how satisfying is that then, being a former athlete and getting a chance to kind of I'm sure as you see it, help them their way to whatever's next?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's they're the Cal student athletes that are incredibly intelligent. They're some of the most intelligent people, I've ever been around, and they're 18, 19, 20 years old, obviously. And so, yeah, it's really fun. And I take a lot of, joy out of seeing them, pursue all of their endeavors, both on the field and off the field. And so, yeah, I interact with the student athletes pretty heavily. With 900, I don't interact with all of them, and our office is kind of split up by team. So I work with football and basketball a little more than some other sports. Then also our Olympic sports, so primarily our swimmings and our water polos, which we have a lot of student athletes who compete in the Olympics. And so there's some issues that come with that with our Olympic student athletes. But yeah, I met with a football student athlete yesterday who's starting a nonprofit and a charity, and there's some rules we have to navigate around that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. They're doing good things. They're good people. They have some really amazing endeavors, and it's fun to be able to help them navigate that and pursue what they want to do.
It is sort of a proud tradition too, because I look at you were there, and every time I hear Jaylen Brown speak, I'm blown away by just how erudite that young man is, his worldview. And I mean, there is a sense of real pride in sending these great Cal exports out into the world, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. They're people that contribute to the world and really make a difference. And Jaylen is a prime example of that. And he's one of the nicest human beings that you could ever be around. And he cares probably more about worldly important issues than he does about the game of basketball. And I don't say that to mean he doesn't care about basketball, because obviously he does. He's a amazing basketball player. So yeah, it's really cool to see. And I think that's probably what makes Cal such a fun place to work at, is you have these, they're worldwide leaders is who they are. That's who they are at their heart. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's a little different world, and I'm not doing my job if I don't ask you this question. And Ewing is not like Berkeley, and Berkeley is not like anything else on the planet for people who don't know. kind of initial culture shock was that for you, a kid in Lewis County, when you first got there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, growing up in LaGrange, which my mom still lives there, Lewis County, obviously small town. And yeah, it's Columbia. Columbia is great, and it's a college town, so there's it's a little more liberal than maybe some other places. And then yeah, I moved to San Francisco from Columbia, and that was quite the culture shock. But it obviously I didn't mind it. And then Berkeley is kind of its own entity in a sense. So yeah, it's interesting. There's things every day. It's just like, it's pretty interesting when you think about things, but it's a cultural shock, but it's, when you get used to it and you're kind of ingrained in it, it's not, obviously you get used to it. And, yeah, and California is so diverse too. I mean, it's such a big state. Berkeley's different than San Francisco even, and different than Marin County, which is where I currently live. And so, yeah, I miss home though. I will say that there's nothing better than getting back to Lewis County.
Well, you got a chance to do that recently with your sister's wedding, and obviously you've connected dots really nicely on all of your passions to kind of make this a career for yourself. I have to go back to your high school days and your athletic days in particular, Ben. What did you kind of learn about self and about, because you have swam upstream in an industry that's not easy to break into. What kind of things in terms of personal resolve and discipline and all of the things that have kind of contributed to your success now do you glean from your days in Cougar athletics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is I had really, really demanding coaches in high school, in both football, basketball, and track. And I had the same coach in football and track. But yeah, the coaches I had were probably more demanding than most high school athletes would ever have. And so, there's a bit of, yeah, as you said, kind of self-resolve and kind of just building who you are as a person that comes out of that. And I think a lot of those things that we went through in high school, I still remember we probably practiced harder than any team in the tri-state area. And I would say that, for the next 20 years, but it's every day. It was just, with both coaches I had, it was just like we went, 110% and nothing left in the tank by the end of practice. And so, yeah, that's just kind of the mindset that that we instilled, and everybody worked hard. And, I've kind of, because of that, it's been ingrained, and I've, taken it and tried to run with it. And at this point, it's probably a little bit more second nature. But yeah, a lot of those values and things that are instilled in you and things that habits you practice on a daily basis in terms of, how hard you go, it carries on for the rest of, well, I guess the last 15 years. I can't believe it's been that long, but yeah.
It does seem strange because, it seems like the architecture of this has gone by really quickly and that it's been a really nice ride for you. But if you look back and tell yourself something, or if you would to talk to somebody who said, hey, I have a career interest in this, what piece of advice would you share, Ben? What was kind of the most important and salient piece of advice you've been given, or at least this discovery you've made along the way in your path?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say probably being proactive, and that's something I've done. The first day I was on campus at Mizzou my freshman year, I moved into the dorms and I walked straight over to the football office and said, hey, I want to work with the team. And they were like, well, what do you want to do? I said, whatever you guys want me to do, just tell me. But it wasn't posted anywhere. I literally walked into the office. And then same thing with, I'm interning at UCLA. They didn't have an internship, posted, but I sent out my resume to every Division I school on the West Coast, and they called me back the next day. So, I think it's always not being afraid to take the initiative and be proactive. The worst thing somebody can say is no, and that's fine. You can move to the next door, or knock on the next door. So I think the more doors you knock on, the more opportunities you have. And I know, that's maybe not everybody believes that, but that's just been my approach. And it's boded well for me. So that's what I would say is don't be afraid to be proactive. Don't be afraid to reach out, and don't be afraid to maybe do something outside the box that you could, potentially be scared of. Cause like it's scared to go from Lewis County to Columbia to California. That's not most people, I never saw myself doing that. But I've been out here 10 years and I love it. And yeah, if I wasn't, proactive and didn't take the initiative and do those things, I certainly wouldn't be where I am today by any means.
One of the things that I'm really impressed with, especially doing this series, is how many folks, and especially that obviously, Ben, you're associated with, we've had on here, and particularly with you, obviously closest first as a rival, and then as a friend with Adam Potts, with all the things that have kind of gone on and gone right. And the scope of this is, I think we've now done almost 40 of these, and there's just so much outlier success from everywhere. And you touched on being, a LaGrange kid who's risen to this level, and Adams now in the NFL, and Torrey Neiman's now risen to an incredibly high level. I mean, are you surprised, or are you at least scope of people's successes? Are you kind of impressed and amazed by that?
Yeah, I think I am in a sense, and not at the people of where they are, but it is, following you. Like I think I told you when we chatted before this, there's people you interviewed that I didn't know before, and so it is pretty amazing the number of people that have come from our area and gone on to do great things in sports. So with Adam and Tori specifically, not surprised at all. They're very successful people. They are, and they're not done yet. They will end up, being the top of what they do before long. Yeah, and it was cool. Adam actually worked at Cal for about a year and a half. So I didn't even know he was there. He was there about a week, and then I ran into him, and it's a pretty funny story. We'll have to fill you in sometime. But yeah, it was cool to work with him for about 2 years. So, and he's done really well, and now obviously working with in the NFL. So yeah, not surprised, but the number of people is pretty cool though. So yeah.
So what's next for you? I mean, obviously you sound incredibly happy, but I know you're a guy who's always been kind of attuned to opportunity, and especially opportunities, which I think is really a credit to you, that fit the things that you want to do. You're a guy who's always been driven to things and not set limits and fit into a box. I'm going to do the things that I enjoy. Is this something you could do for another 10 years, or do you kind of keep your antenna up, go, well, I have some other interests I'd like to fulfill, because it has been a really good journey to this point?
Yeah, it has been great. I think ultimately probably long-term view, obviously I'm kind of on a path to hopefully be an athletic director someday. That's not going to happen, in the next, 5 to 7 years, but maybe the 15-year window is probably a little bit more appropriate. But yeah, I'm committed and I'm loyal, and I've been at Cal 5 years and I love it. But I also, I think the next step would be probably something a more maybe sport specific. And again, I work with football, and I oversee the day-to-day operations of our compliance office. But with kind of where college athletics has developed the last 5 years, football and basketball specifically are kind of on their own track, so to speak. And I think we could see that develop a little more in the coming years. And so, yeah, I think being a little bit more intimate, working with one of those two sports would probably be my next step. So we'll see how things shake out. But yeah, it's always good to enjoy where you are, and it's but I am calculated, and so yeah, we'll see how it is. But yeah, it's with football and basketball specifically, and kind of where they take off. There's a lot of discussions on that across the country and with the NCAA. So we'll see what develops with it.
You're headed into a strange fall. I mean, we're in the midst of the biggest sports stop, or at least we're coming out of, or look like we were for at least a week there, the biggest sports stop since World War II. What's kind of the vibe? I mean, you're in the athletic department, you're there, and nobody kind of knows anything, do they, at this point?
Yeah, it's been a wild roller coaster the last 4 months. I traveled with basketball to the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, and we, while we were playing our first round game in the Pac-12 tournament, that's when the news broke about Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. And then, everything it was like every 10 minutes something was changing. And by the time our game was over, which it was only 2 hours, like the NBA had, canceled the games for the night. And so that was the first domino. So yeah, and we've kind of had some glimpses of hope, and then with kind of where the pandemic has taken us, it kind of pulled us back. And the last couple of weeks has been a little bit more negative, probably, in where we were a month ago. But right now, yeah, you've seen certain conferences, certain schools are certainly delaying things until the spring, and it looks like it's probably headed there for most sports, most fall sports, I should say. football, they're working on a hybrid model to delay the start of the season. And, maybe we'll see what happens, but it'll probably be later fall is where it's looking like it's heading before they'll actually get to competition. But all of it's kind of controlled by, medical personnel, pandemic, the data, and all of those things, which no one has, any control over. So everybody's doing their best to navigate it and figure it out, and trust, the doctors and the medical personnel and the data. And yeah, obviously we have to keep everybody safe. So that's the main priority. So we'll see how things go. And things have changed so much on a weekly and daily basis the last 4 months. They could swing back the other direction and things could, resume back to normal. And that's what everybody's hoping for. But yeah, we'll see.
Last one for you, Ben. You've done a fantastic job, but I want to talk to you a little bit about models and about, mentors, people who have had influence on your life, because I think everywhere it's important to have those. And I know you've had some great coaches. I also know that you were particularly close to Josh Houchins, the late great Josh Houchins, who, was somebody who was a Highland grad, went on and did great things across the road at WGM with the radio. I know he was super proud of your success. People you want to shout out along the way who kind of made it for you to dream and dream a little bigger than just your zip code of origin?
Yeah, no, that's also a good question. Josh was an amazing person, and it was so enjoyable seeing him excel at what he did. He was literally, the best. And I know he would thoroughly enjoy this segment that you're doing, if not maybe even be a part of it. So yeah, he's one of the coolest people that I've ever met, that came out of Highland. So everybody misses him, obviously. In terms of other people that have had impacts, in my life, Coach Caniglio is now at Hannibal. He was my football coach and my track coach. So I got a break from him during the winter months during basketball. But yeah, he was very demanding and really, I think we had a really, really good working relationship in terms of coach athlete. And he really pushed me. He pushed the boundaries on things I didn't necessarily know I could do, especially in track. Triple jump specifically, every year we would go into the start of the season and, he would say, you're going to hit this mark. And I'm like, coach, that's like 2 to 3 feet above, where I'm at. Like, that's going to be tough. And then we would sit there and we would train, for 8 to 10 weeks. And by the time we got to the end of the season, I hit those marks that he laid out. So he really pushed me. And that was great because, I think internally I recognize, hey, some of those things you mentioned about limits and, things you go after. I think he really laid that out for me, and he did that all 4 years, that I had him. And that was pretty fun. And we did it in football too, my senior year. We had a very small team, I think 27 guys on our roster, and it didn't matter. We had goals and we hit some of those goals and fell short on others. But yeah, he was a big impact on me in high school. And then, yeah, in college, I worked with the football program, but Coach Pinkel, I love him, and he's one of, the most amazing human beings I've been around. I'm very thankful for everything he did for me. He's a very kind human, obviously a very successful coach. But, he didn't have to, do anything for me, and he was always willing to go out of his way for anyone if he could help in any way. And so he was great. It was good to, be a part of the program and in the success that we had the 4 years I was at Mizzou, especially in 2007 with our kind of magical season. So yeah, those are a couple of people. My mom, obviously, she doesn't work in sports, but she's the biggest part of my life, and probably why I've got to where I've gotten. And she does ask me to come home, move home probably every other week. Like, when are you coming back? I'm like, permanently? She's like, yeah. I'm like, we'll see. So someday.